Oh, all right. Okay. Okay. Yeah. You'll start. Okay. Okay. I think we're about to kick off. Thank you very much for your patience, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this side event, which, as you can see, is titled "Sector Strategies in African Agriculture and Agri Business." Um, it is being run by the Export Development Advisory Unit from Afrexim Bank under the Export Development Department. I think before I sort of kick off, I think one of the reasons why we wanted to hold this session was to maybe help to dispel some of the myths that exist around banking about what we bankers do. I think for a lot of people, bankers um, simply look at loan files and decide whether or not to give out loans. But there is another aspect of banking, another aspect of development banking, which we actually participate in and which the Export Development Advisory Unit at the Afrexim Bank supports. And this is about capacitation. This is about technical assistance. This is about creating the right environment, creating the right policies, and helping to support the entire value chain within agriculture. So the issue of funding comes in, or can only come in and can only be successful if we are able to capacitate those who are involved in the sector, or capacitate the institution under which they operate. So that's very important. So this, what your key takeaway from here should be, how can you work, maybe your organizations, maybe your farmer organizations, maybe your the institutions that provide you with an umbrella. How can you work with the Afrexim Bank to ensure that you have the right capacity to be able to access and deploy funding? And we can help you to do that, because our mandate is about supporting the continent to be a manufacturer, supporting industrialization, supporting value addition, and not just for the big corporates, but also we're increasingly looking at smallholder farmers. We're increasingly looking at how to support microfinance, working with partners like the World Food Program, the EFCFTA, and just creating that awareness within the entire industry. So this is really what this session is about. How can we support you, and not just supporting you and saying that we're giving you money, to go and for working capital or what have you, but how can we support you to make sure that you have the right competencies to do what you have to do. So without further ado, I think I'll perhaps start by inviting Dr. Janet to to come to the stage and to come to the stage and give a statements. Dr. Janet is obviously a very close friend of Afrexim Bank. She is currently the head of the Rural Economy Division in the Department of Rural Economy and Agriculture of the African Union Commission, based in Addis Ababa, and she is someone with a significantly high a profile, whom we are always very keen to work with, and dip into her fountain of knowledge. So without further ado, I'll call Dr. Janet to come up to the stage and present her statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abba, and thank you for those very kind words. Much appreciated. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm happy to engage again with us this afternoon. So Dr. Yemi Akimbamijo, Executive Director of FARA, Mr. Dejene Tezera, Director, Department of Agribusiness, UNIDO, Mrs. Beatrice Letsunyane, MD Farm Value, South Africa, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to join my voice on behalf of the African Union Commission to thank Afrexim Bank for organizing this side event on optimal sector strategies in African agriculture and agribusiness, with a focus on strengthening ongoing discussion on agro-industry development within the context of the implementation of the Common African Agro-Pacts. The Agenda 2063 is a strategic framework developed and adopted by the African Union heads of state and government for Africa's long-term socioeconomic and integrative transformation to ensure the realization of its growth and prosperity, which has provided the basis for the AU Commission to coordinate impactful interventions on our continent. In the agriculture sector, the AU Agenda 2063 underscores the CADEP agenda as the continental initiative that aims to help African Union member states eliminate hunger and reduce poverty by raising economic growth through agriculture-led development. Improving agriculture, research, technology dissemination, and adoption are part of the key priorities that are required to advance the implementation of the Comprehensive African Agricultural Development Program, also known as the CADEP. The African Union Commission has been cooperating with research institutions such as FARA to heighten agricultural research and knowledge that could help us to identify gaps, analyze them, and find solutions to build resilient food systems on our continent, and also to the needs and commitments made by the AU heads of state and governments in the Malabo Declaration to transform agriculture and improve the livelihoods of our people. The Commission has also been advocating for African governments to strengthen support to Africa-based research institutions and participating organizations such as CORAF, ASARECA, CADESA, NASRU, that form FARA, and AFAS that are being strengthened under the CADEP XP4 program supported by IFAD and the European Union. But the situation today is that the smallholder farmers, who represent more than 70% of our production systems and are the main sources of agro-industries, are still lacking access to decent technologies to perform their business. They have poor linkage to markets and are disconnected from the food value chains that have to rely on external markets to import processed food and even import raw products in some cases. And this narrative needs to change. Dear ladies and gentlemen, the African Union Commission adopted the Food Security Action Plan in November of last year, together with research institutions, FARA, and the CG centers, hosted by the Africa Development Bank, to be another strong commitment to boost our efforts for increased attention to African farmers with the much needed technologies and innovation. In fact, it is obvious that smallholder farmers alone cannot sustain food deals on our continent. Local and international private sector, including small and medium-sized entrepreneurs, are critical actors to unleashing Africa's agricultural potential with linkages to farmers. It was therefore necessary to rethink how to create an enabling environment for linking the business community with the smallholder farmers with the move of agro-industry development on the continent, such as the special agro-processing zones promoted by the Africa Development Bank at national level, and the transnational common African agro-parks that's been promoted by the African Union Commission, the AFCFTA, and AUDA NEPAD. Africa heavily relies on the smallholder farmers who form the majority agricultural workforce in Africa, and will be supported to better ascertain a sustainable supply of quality raw products to the agro-industries in Africa. The micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises have therefore a strong role to play in the process of upgrading the status of smallholder farmers for their sustainable access to the large market of quality raw products that is anticipated for the agro-industries. And their financing and business environment also needs to be strengthened for higher impacts in reaching the smallholder farmers. It is in this endeavor that the African Union Commission is working to establish a public-private partnership-driven governance for implementing the CAPs. We are currently engaged in mainstreaming the private sector perspectives in improving the partnerships agreements that shall culminate in a leading role to the private sector in the agro-industrialization of our continent. Focus on the recent engagement of the AU Commission with FARA and the African Union Business Council stressed on building cooperation under the CAPs to strengthen and transform agricultural value chains, improve commercialization to establish premium markets for small and medium-sized enterprises and smallholder farmers, while integrating climate-smart and regenerative agricultural practices to improve farmer resilience, increasing the intra-Africa trade. The linkages between agribusiness, research, and innovation are compelling and must be coordinated at continental level and strengthened to improve the competitiveness and mobility of commodities produced within our continent. The investment needs from financial and business institutions in upscaling climate-smart technological innovations and business solutions that respond most to the needs of smallholder farmers are to be identified and promoted. This was the basis of the Memorandum of Understanding that was signed this morning between the Forum for Agricultural Research in Africa and the AU African Business Council to allow greater collaborative actions for implementing the CAPS program cluster 6. You might recall that this morning I had outlined the 7 program clusters for the CAPS, and program cluster 6 is forming the MOU that we had signed this morning with the Africa Business Council. So we're already beginning to make some progress in terms of implementing the 7 clusters I had presented this morning. And so just as a reminder, program cluster 6 is on strengthening political, financing, and business environment for micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises to transfer green technology to smallholder farmers in Africa, while also establishing competitive markets for the supply of quality products to agro-industries in Africa within the context of the CAPs. Agro-industries in Africa will be relying on the raw products coming from our smallholder farmers on the continent, and the private sector have a key role to play. And in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, the African Union Commission will continue relying on the support from Agribusiness Bank and of course other partners who are willing to support us on this very great journey to promote workable models that give increased leadership role to the private sector in developing agro-industries in Africa. I thank you very much for your kind attention, and I look forward to very fruitful deliberations in this session. Thank you, and Abba, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you enormously, Dr. Janet. I think some of the key issues that came out from that statement and which resonates um, or should resonate with us really is about how to pull in technology such that smallholder farmers and agribusiness can leverage that. And I think that is also a key theme of this conference. And some of the work that we're doing at the bank, working with the World Food Program, also is informed by that narrative. And I think that's something that we can really boost together. So thank you again, Dr. Janet. So without further ado, I would like to call to the stage really a giant in the field of agriculture and agriculture research, who is going to speak about the role of science in enhancing value in agricultural value chain. None other than Dr. Yemi Akibamijo, and he is the current and outgoing executive director for FARA, the Forum for Agricultural Research in Africa. And if there's one thing to say about him is he's passionate and he is a thought and process leader in this space, and would love to hear from him. Please welcome Dr. Yemi to the stage.
Thank you, Abba, for those nice words about me. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Please allow me to stand on existing protocol in the interests of time. Allow me first to sincerely appreciate Afrexim Bank for the strong commitment to supporting agro-industries and agribusiness development initiative on the continent. And I wish to thank the bank for also organizing this event, which provides us with another platform to discuss the importance of science in making African agriculture and agribusiness more competitive. We cannot overemphasize the importance of linking science, innovation, and agribusiness in establishing competitive agricultural value chains and in enhancing resilient food systems on our continent. Cutting-edge research products can only make a difference when they are in the hands of producers and entrepreneurs. And this is why inclusive and sustainable agriculture-led growth must go with widespread adoption of improved technologies, practices, and approaches by system actors, including service providers, input suppliers, and so on. For many years, FARA has been working to strengthen connections and coordination among agricultural system stakeholders and facilitating product engagement that are meant to move innovations forward towards higher impacts on the continent. The African Agribusiness and Science Week is one of FARA's engagement platform to achieve this aim. For those of you who might have been following the trend, the initial acronym, ab initio, was AASW, which was African Agricultural Science Week. But necessity is upon us to go further afield and see how we make this relevant. And that is what informed, although we retain the same acronym AASW, but you see there is a slight tweak, Africa Agribusiness and Science. So what this is telling us is we do not do science just because we want to make publications or put it in our shelves. No, I always say you cannot be brain rich and pocket empty. That's a fallacy. Yes, you've got to push it through. You've got brain rich and it must sound there. You didn't hear it. So well, when it begins to sound, when it begins to sound, you will know. Okay, no, it's better on Bitcoin. Thank you very much for that. I mean, that's just the essence that we decided to shift a little bit, not just focalizing on just the science, but it must be linked with the business environment. So we work in partnership with continental, regional, and national policymakers to strengthen enabling environment that is surrounding incentives and constraints to increase access to technological and digital solutions, to increase access to finance, and to improve performance and efficiency of agricultural market systems. For the moment, the continent is still lagging to achieving continental goals such as the CADEP Malabo initiative that is set for establishing competitive agricultural value chains, and this low progress is mainly due to challenges of transferring existing solutions to the larger farming communities for them to enhance their production system and reduce post-harvest losses. Only last night, or 2 nights ago rather, was discussing with the Minister of Agriculture of South Africa that many of these meetings that we hold, you have geneticists, you have production specialists, agronomists, livestock specialists, and so on, dairy specialists, but we do not have the food technologists. We don't have that group that can help that's the missing middle from the field to the shelf. And this morning, I think, Russell, you were talking about the farm to the fork. Things don't jump from farm to fork. They go through food processing, they go through food technologies for preservation and all of that. So, to make sense a bit on how the low use of science and technology is affecting wealth in agriculture business, let me take the example of just crop yield, what we call the yield gap. There is considerable gap between the farm yields and the potential yields of major crops such as cereals, roots and tubers, pulses, sugar crops, etc. Today we observe very large differences in crop yields between high-income and low-income countries. And the estimated yield gaps expressed as a percentage of potential yield can vary from anywhere between 50 to 11% in low-income areas in Africa. Yield of wheat and rice in most of the low-income areas of the continent are currently less than half of those in other countries. This means that revenue in these commodities will not be commensurate with their partners, with their homologs in the developed economies. And again, I also speak to this in the same dimension that the economy of scale in the African context is nothing compared with the developing countries who are selling to us. Today, if I sit in a developed economy, I'm an animal scientist. If I want to set up a dairy farm, just with this computer, I will get my vet, my animals, my semen, my feed, my electricity, my water, my prefab, my everything. Provided you have that small plastic card, everything will arrive tomorrow morning. But if you are in Africa, I don't mean South Africa. If you are in Africa, let's make that difference. You are your own vet, you are your own power generation, you are your own everything. By the time your product reaches the market, it cannot compare with Brazilian or Dutch products. It cannot. The problem is not them, but rather it lies in our inability, I like that music, to strengthen our production systems by using the available research products. Our inability to ensure market integration for smallholder farmers through the transfer of emerging digital solutions for improved advisory services and innovative financing models still left on the papers. How can we talk about competitive value chains under these conditions? When one egg that is produced entirely in a Nigerian ecosystem is going to be about 10 times that which is produced in a Dutch system. You cannot. By the time those two products enter the market, the locally produced products cannot match. Ladies and gentlemen, it is another time to stress again that investment in science, technology, and innovation are critical for developing improved products and practices and strengthening local capacity and incorporating science and data into policy and decision making for establishing competitive value chains. Promoting increased investment in agricultural research and development and incentivizing investment by fostering a trade positive environment for the end products of the innovations therefore becomes a task of all the players. It's not just one person. So, ladies and gentlemen, in the context of the current move for agro-industry development in Africa, such as the CAPs, the Common African Agro Pacts that we've been talking about, the adoption of emerging technologies, including advanced sensing, remote sensing, artificial intelligence, autonomous systems, and robotics, biotechnologies become very crucial. Equally, the most appropriate communication and networking technologies shall be adopted to strengthen local production systems to be more sustainable, productive, resilient, profitable, and financially inclusive. We shall therefore applaud all efforts that aim in doing the following. One, to support and promote appropriate, responsible application of new and improved technologies in agriculture. Two, to support data-driven, intensive, hyperlocal agriculture, which requires an integrated set of digital approaches to be successful. As we recognize that several factors such as infrastructure gap, costs, capacity, digital technology, and ICTs, mobile phones, among others, can hinder the rapid adoption of emerging technologies, it was compelling for FARA to invest in promoting capacity, development, awareness, and political advocacy activities so that local expertise can be activated to engineer approaches for effective transfer of research products to African farming communities in accordance with local contextual factors. In our reviewed engagement strategy, we will further embark on policymakers, development partners, private sector, and financial institutions to facilitate increased access to finance for growth-oriented micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises through lending facilities, partial credit guarantees, financial products, and so on. Together with the African Union Commission, the AU Business Council, and the sub-regional bodies like CADESA, CORAF, and ASARECA, we will strengthen capacities of our African governments to develop and manage an open, transparent, and accountable policy environment that encourages private sector investment, fosters open markets, and rules-based trading within the context of the AfCFTA, and also increase the tenure security, support inclusion, and support responsible natural resource management in the specific context of severe climate variabilities. This is the intention that is included in the MOU that I signed this morning with the African Union Business Council for strengthening partnership for linking science, innovation, and agribusiness for resilient food systems and to boost inter-African trade with the context of the Common Agro Pacts. My dear sister Janet, so we've worked together for many years in the African Union. I would like to send you back with one message. Every year there is the theme for the summit. So let us work out more pragmatic ways of unpacking and applying these themes. We were in the AU together when 1 year it was sustaining CADEP momentum 13 years ago. Then thereafter, boosting inter-African trade. That was 12 years ago. But 12 years after, we are still boosting the same inter-African trade. So I don't know how many times we need to boost this boost. So basically what I'm saying is, let's stop with the blah blah and start with the do-dos. Thank you very much.
Thank you exceedingly, Dr. Dr. Yemi. I think the only boost I know is the COVID vaccine. Yeah. Yeah, but on a more serious note, there's a very pertinent comment that Dr. Yemi made regarding the technology gap that agriculture actually has, and just saying that when you are on the continent, you are your own everything. But I think there is a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel in terms of saying that by working with a Frexim bank, you might be able to get a partner to accompany you so that you can get these things, because we're very, very keen and very, very strong on supporting that processing within agriculture. So we're very supportive of that. Okay, I think the time has come for us to move to the panel session. We were meant to have 4 panelists. We currently have 2 physically present here. We have 1 online, and there's been an emergency, a personal emergency with another of our panelists, so they won't be able to make it. But we have questions as well, and I know Russell is here. We can again share some of those questions with Russell, and to also feed from his expertise that we have in the room. So we need to leverage that. So I will call on stage my very esteemed colleague, Esther Makamure, to join us on the platform. She is a relationship manager based in Southern Africa and looks after our Southern African region. So she's someone you need to know. She covers quite a few Southern African countries, and she's based in Harare. And I'd also like to call on my very good friend, Janet Tezera, who is the Director Agribusiness sector within UNIDO. Janet makes things happen. And I quite like him for that. And he is also extremely passionate about agribusiness, about processing within agriculture, and that is something that I think we can learn from. And we have online, last but not least, Mr. Anton Said, who is the head of trade development strategy at the United Nations International Trade Center, UNITC, based in Geneva. And he's been with the ITC since 2003, and he's been engaged in the area of trade promotion and trade development at both the national and international levels for the past 30 years. So we have a lot of expertise in the room. So a lot of questions. So a few questions we're going to ask them. And after that, obviously, it's open for you as well to ask questions should you have any to share. Okay. So Anton, can you hear us?
I can. Thank you very much. And good afternoon to everybody.
Super.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes. We can hear you. We can hear you loud and clear. In fact, Anton, let me start with you. And I think the first question is for those here present, including the agribusiness private sector. How does ITC formulate successful strategies for exports in sectors like agribusiness?
Okay, that's a loaded question. Thank you very much once again. Good afternoon to everybody, and greetings from Geneva. So ITC has been in the business of trade and trade strategy design for the past 20 years. And during this time, we have worked in over 70 countries and in all kinds of different sectors, including manufacturing, tourism sectors, service sectors, and not least various agriculture sectors. So the idea behind the development of this suite of solutions, if you like, came from the understanding that trade and international competitiveness, do not happen by accident, but they happen by design. So in other words, to develop trade, to become more competitive, you require a deliberate set of considered actions. And this is what a strategy is about. Strategy is really about setting priorities and allocating limited resources to those priorities, whether the resources are financial or human or institutional. So the reason to pursue strategy in the first instance is to focus on these priorities, on those areas, on those sectors or subsectors, which we think will give us the best results. The truth is that if we had unlimited resources, if we could do everything for everybody, then we don't need a strategy at all. We just implement whatever needs to be done. So the real answer here is not just about having a strategy. It is about having the right strategy. The right strategy for you, for your competitive situation, for the status of the policy framework, the regulatory framework, the geography, and so on and so forth. So I often like to challenge counterparts to think about what is it that you are really after. Are you after, a piece of paper, a strategy document with a plan of action to tell you what to do and to be able to show this off? Or are you after, what it is that strategy could actually produce in terms of results? And I think I know the answer to this one. But to come more to the point of your strategy, of your question, the ITC has over the years developed a very specific methodology and a process to go along with that methodology, which will help us to partner up with the partner countries and help them to make the right decisions for themselves within a very comprehensive scope. So the strategies that ITC produces are very specific, but they are specific within a very broad scope because we address supply side capacities and the building of those supply side capacities. It addresses the quality of the business environment, the policy framework, the regulatory framework, and it addresses also market entry, meaning not only market access, because market access is many times already available, but tactics to enable enterprises, and most notably small and medium-sized enterprises, to make tracks into international markets. But there is also then the developmental angle, because ultimately we don't want to do trade for the sake of doing trade. We want to do trade because we perceive that this will have a contribution on the standards of living of our citizens. So we look into various dimensions there, including women in trade and youth. We look at regional integration. We look at the environment and environmental sustainability, poverty reduction, and so on and so forth. So in a nutshell, this is it. But there is a lot more that one can discuss in order to identify, what constitutes the right strategy and what I feel are some of the most common mistakes, if you like, that are made in the pursuit of the design of such strategies, whether for the agricultural sector or other sectors as well. But over to you, Abba. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anton. I think one of the key things that came out from your intervention is crafting the right strategy means knowing exactly what your priorities are. And I think maybe the message for you to take in the room is when you go back to your different regions or institutions, to ask yourselves, what is our strategy and how can we deploy, what are our priorities and how can we deploy that and align them with a strategy such that we can achieve the objectives that we're looking to achieve. So I think that's quite important. Now to Dejene, and I'd really like you to speak to this audience on what you do and why it should matter to them, because I know that UNIDO has been very actively involved in supporting agribusiness projects across different regions, and I want you to share your experiences, the experience you have garnered along the line in terms of sector strategies, implementation, and how they have resulted in tangible socio-economic impacts. Over to you, Dejene.
Thank you, Abba. As UNIDO, we ourselves do not develop a strategy, but rather we support the countries and other stakeholders to develop their own strategy. You provide technical input and expertise and accompany them in the development and implementation of the strategies. The first point, we want our partners, usually the governments in developing countries, is to consider that the strategies they try to develop for a sector should be in line with the national economic development strategy of those countries. It should be the process of developing this strategy also should be very inclusive and consultative, which mainly also this consultation should be done with the private sector and the sectoral associations. The other important point which we recommend and support in achieving is making the ownership of this strategy very clear. There should be a clear ownership and should be defined and agreed with all the stakeholders. The other point is that there must be a very clear roadmap for the implementation of this strategy, and the proper financing mechanism also should be available. We also advise the governments and other stakeholders that a proper institutional setup is required to implement these strategies under the ownership of the government, the sovereign government of the country. So in all this process of developing a strategy, the role of UNIDO is to bring international experience and try to help the governments to learn from the successes and failures of strategies developed in other countries in a similar context, and learn from the success and the failures of these strategies. These are important. To go into more concrete examples of what we did, that we supported the government of Senegal to develop their agro-industry sector strategy, which was also the priority of the economic development strategy of Senegal, Plan Senegal Emergent, and then which included the subsectors like textile, leather, and agro-food sectors. This is important. We support the government in selecting these subsectors based on their contribution to the job creation, import substitution, export potential, and the potential also to attract investment, mainly investment which wanted investors to want to migrate from the Southeast Asian countries into Africa. As they call the forced migration of let's say light industries from UK to America, America to Japan, Japan from Southeast Asia. Now it's time that these investors are migrating to Africa in search of let's say low wage in Africa. So we helped also the government in the implementation of these strategies, and hundreds of thousands of jobs were created. Linkages with the agriculture sector was achieved, and also the value-added export has drastically increased in the first 5 years. So we were involved in the whole process, from the economic planning of the central government level, and also sector and subsector strategies as a neutral broker. This process was critical for achieving a tangible socio-economic result in a very sustainable way. I hope I have touched upon all the points.
No, absolutely, Dejene. I think that's extremely useful. I think the experience that you bring from the AgriPoles in Senegal is useful for some of the activities that we're looking to do as well on the continent. So thank you very much for that. I want to bring this conversation closer home by asking Esther to speak a little bit about some of the things we're doing in Malawi, in Botswana. But Esther, I know our bank has really stepped up its efforts towards improving food security on the continent. So I want you to speak a little bit to the financial and non-financial interventions that the bank deploys towards this objective. But also, there is a product that we have within the bank called country programs, and we're currently looking at a country program in Botswana. Can you speak a little bit to that as well for the benefit of our audience? Thank you.
Thank you, and good afternoon to everyone. Thank you very much, Abba. As Afri-Exim Bank, we realize the importance of agriculture and what it does for Africa. We have come up with a number of interventions to support agriculture. Today you find Africa is still importing a significant amount of wheat, of maize, from outside Africa, from Europe, from Brazil, all over from Asia. And yet we have countries with capacity to produce, countries like Zimbabwe, Malawi, Botswana, Namibia, South Africa, who, if we are able to support, will be able to produce enough food for the whole continent. We saw this on the realization when we had the Russia-Ukraine crisis. Egypt is one of the biggest exporters of wheat on the continent. Importer of wheat on the continent. And consequently, they actually had challenges in terms of securing wheat. So what has Afri-Exim Bank done in this space? We are working with partners. We include the World Food Programme. We are setting up what we call mega farms. The mega farms initiative is an initiative where we are seeking to maximize food production on the continent. We are working in Malawi with the government of Malawi in terms of developing mega farms for producing of wheat and maize. The same concept is being rolled out in Zimbabwe, where we are working with the government of Zimbabwe as well to do agro-parks. This agro-park, the one we're doing in Zimbabwe, is actually a joint agro-park with the government of Zambia. So it will be between Zimbabwe and Zambia. where we are seeking to maximize production between Zimbabwe and Zambia, realizing that their weather permits for production of grains, production of wheat. We are also working with the government of Botswana, like Abba mentioned, in the Pandamatenga area, where we are setting up an agro park, which will be dedicated to the production, not only of crops, but we are also looking at what we can do with livestock. In Africa, we have a lot of livestock. A lot of our countries are importing leather, and yet we have capacity to produce leather products within the continent. So through these initiatives, this is one area that the bank is looking at in terms of the mega farms. We are also working at industrial parks. We are working closely with our partner, Arise Integrated Industrial Parks, in the development of industrial parks in Africa. The reason for development of industrial parks is the realization that today Africa is a commodity exporter. We do not export finished goods. Most of the goods we're exporting on the continent are actually raw goods, which we then go and buy back when they are now finished goods. So the industrial park initiative is seeking to say, how can we beneficiate our products? How can we beneficiate the areas that we specialize in as a continent? We have developed an agro park in Gabon. We are working on one in Benin. We've got one in Togo as well. There are lots of these industrial parks coming up, others in Malawi. In Malawi, we are looking at 2 industrial parks, both agriculture linked, one in Lilongwe and one in Blantyre. In Zimbabwe, we are looking also at an industrial park, one for agriculture and one for mining commodities. In Zambia, DRC, we are doing an industrial park for development of lithium batteries. This follows a realization that if you look on the continent, DRC today is the cheapest producer, 15 times more cheaper to produce lithium batteries in the whole world. But Africa today is busy importing batteries from China, and yet we've got capabilities to produce batteries within the continent. We've also got upcoming industrial parks in Nigeria, Kenya, Chad, Rwanda. So this is some of the initiatives the bank is taking on the realization that we need to develop the continent. It's not all talk. So I know the previous gentleman who spoke about Africa being talk, talk, talk. I can tell you Afreximbank is not talk, talk, it's action, action, action. So it is good to be in the forefront of such initiatives and actually getting our hands dirty and actually ensuring that we leave this continent better than we found it. Abba spoke about the country program. One of the initiatives that we do as a bank is we identify countries that are in need of interventions, especially interventions in agriculture, manufacturing, aerospace, automotive sector, mining, blue economy. And Botswana is one of the countries where we are doing a 1.5 billion country program. The reason for this program is really to say, how can we get Botswana to maximize? They are a diamond producing economy, but today they are selling their diamonds rough. There's no value add into those diamonds, so they go out, they get maybe 10% of the value of the diamond, and yet where it's sold and polished, they get the 90%. So we are working with governments to say, what are your capabilities? How can we come in and assist you in terms of getting your countries to produce, to manufacture, to beneficiate? So this is really the thrust of the country program. We have companies in Botswana like the Botswana Meat Corporation. Today, Botswana is exporting 80% of its beef to the European Union. And yet Egypt is importing most of its beef from Europe. Yet there could be synergies between these 2 African countries where we promote intra-African trade, where Egypt is able to get its beef from Botswana, and Botswana is able to sell to a member country, maybe even at a better price. But because we are not aware of the markets and what capabilities we can do and get from those markets, you find that today Africa is lagging behind, and yet it should not. We also do export development services, where we do twinning services, where we look at countries to say, what are your capabilities? Which country can we partner you with? Which also needs your services? And thereby, we are creating synergies across the 2 countries. We also look at capacity building, where we are helping countries in terms of some countries will say we have lithium, but we don't know what to do with it. So through our export development advisory services, we are able to come in and do capacity building workshops with them and help these countries develop and industrialize, which is really what we need to be focusing on as Africa. Thank you.
Brilliant. and I can't resist, just following on from that, because Russell is in the room, and I mean, she's talking about twinning, market access, more integration within African countries, and I was speaking yesterday to Trade and Investments KZN, and they were talking about the need and what they would like to do in terms of accessing markets in the rest of Africa. So I just wanted to find out from you, what are really or do you have examples of some of these efforts, originating from South Africa, or even from Durban in particular, into the rest of Africa? And what are some of the challenges that you face? And what are the opportunities that you see, in terms of supporting businesses, to flow throughout the rest of Africa? Yeah, yeah.
So thanks very much. Really appreciate the time and the opportunities, and thank you for posing the question. I have three very quick points, and that is just to say what we can offer from this region, potential buying power. So, we have the African headquarters for Unilever, one of the largest food and beverage manufacturers based here. I'll just hit. Hello. There we go. I'll hit rewind. So thank you for the question. Three quick points. We have one of the largest food and beverage manufacturers headquartered here, Unilever. It's their Africa and Middle East headquarters. They also have one of their global flagship dry foods plants based here in our city. And so what can we offer? What can we ask? What do we need? They would like to have a lot more import replacement. So locally grown produce, it requires some intermediate processing, drying, powdering, packaging, that kind of thing, but almost an unlimited demand from the likes of Unilever. I can give another example, Sappi. It's one of the largest listed forestry companies on the continent. They don't just grow trees and cut down trees. They also move into higher value added products. So they extract lignin, huge applications in industry, in food, in clothing. They are going to invest a couple of $100 million in a furfural plant, also extracting from wood. Their problem, they want more land, they want more trees, they want more wood. Their problem is not money. Their problem is not selling their product around the world. So these are opportunities of a regional nature where you have demand pull, you have the opportunities from multinationals. Yes, we're working with them, but we are not able to satisfy their requirements just from this region. This is why we need to think SADC and beyond. Second point is around the need to also focus on the logistics. I think, as we all know, part of why product A is not moving from Botswana to Egypt is it's difficult to move the stuff around. So this is where, whether it's Afrexim Bank, Development Bank, European Investment Bank, yes, we'll fix the roads in time. Yes, we'll fix the rail in time, but there are some quicker wins which we could get to, and that is e-government, e-commerce, e-document exchange, EDX. So as the trucks and trains arrive at the borders, okay, the road needs to be fixed, the rail will be fixed in due course, but if we could have the paperwork just fly through at touches of buttons, these are within our grasp to do in the short term, and it will cut the costs and cut the time down enormously. And in return, what else could South Africa offer to others? We have a heavy industrial base. The city of Durban is the second most concentrated industrial manufacturing base in the whole of South Africa. So we would love to offer to the Zimzam Park, to the other parks, whether it be equipment supply or whether it be industrial clustering opportunities. So we can offer these back into the African continent. And I think we need to get a bit selfish as Africans. I've got nothing against people from the East at all. This isn't a cultural issue or a foreign policy issue. We need to become a bit more selfish with our own money and spend our own money on our own continent with our own people. The more we ship our capital to the East, supplying us equipment and so on, okay, it might be a bit cheaper and so on, but will it last as much as something that may be fractionally expensive, but you could be getting a Mercedes-Benz which will spit out widgets for your whole lifetime. So that's my third and last point, is let's get a bit more selfish with the equipment and the professional services and source it from the continent rather always from the east or the northern hemisphere. Thank you.
Super. I mean, thank you so much, Russell. I think it's not out of order to say Africa first. So okay, so you've heard us talking quite a bit. I want to open the floor up for questions that you may have to the panelists, both online and here present, before we move to close this session. So if there are any questions that you may have for myself, for the panelists virtually here, please do. Oh, okay, the gentleman at the front. Thanks.
Okay, Amadou Sidibe, I'm from Mali. I'm dealing with greenhouses. I want to ask Afrin Bank what they have for private sectors, which kind of product they have for private sectors. Because all I had here is about company, about country, about, but about private sector, what do they have for, private sector to improve what you are doing? Thank you.
Have you got anything like private sector? What sector specifically, or because you say you're into greenhouses?
Yeah,
so
vegetable.
That's
vegetable. We are growing, let's say, tomatoes and all those under greenhouse, and the technology is coming from Vegtech, who is in South Africa.
Okay.
They are supplying us greenhouses.
Okay.
And then in Mali, in Bamako, let's say we have about 27 hectares. It's small for you, but it's very huge for our country. So we even export tomatoes to Cote d'Ivoire now,
Okay.
So it's cost a lot for us. In order to do more and more, we need investment. What they have for private sector, what kind of product, financial product. Thank you. Excuse for my bad English, but just trying to.
Merci beaucoup. Hello, me is a small seed company. We want to move on hybrid. We are doing OPV. We want to do hybrid. I'm from Mali also. So what they can do for a seed company, small seed company in Mali. Thank you.
Esther, do you want to take that?
Hello? Okay. Abba, please permit me, before I answer their questions, to answer a question on what Afri-Exim is doing to make logistics easier for companies as they move their goods. So the Afri-Exim has launched its interstate transit guarantee scheme on the realization that today it can take as much as 21 days to move goods between South Africa to DRC. Yeah. So with one transit guarantee, which is our transit guarantee product, within 3 to 5 days, you'll be able to move goods between South Africa to DRC with just one transit bond. So instead of getting to Beitbridge, you deposit a bond, you get to the next border post in Zambia, the next border post, your trucks are now able to move goods and services easily between these countries with just one bond. So where the truck was going to stop at the Zambian border for 3 days and stop at the DRC border for 12 days, that is now all being taken care of by this interstate transit guarantee. This is a product that we have already piloted. And if you are interested in the product, please see me. We can help you move your goods seamlessly between the borders. And this is one of the initiatives the bank is doing to try and assist trade, to try and make it easier to move our goods and products. Because also we notice that some of us are producing fruits and vegetables, which imagine if I harvest a tomato today in South Africa, I want to move it to DRC. It takes 15 days. By those 15 days, by the time it gets to DRC, it could be bad. Yeah. So we need to make logistics work in Africa. We are also working on the rail north-south corridor to try and make a railway line from South Africa all the way to DRC. And hopefully will then move from DRC up to all the way to the north. These are some of the initiatives that the bank is working on to try and ease logistics for the continent. And then now coming to your question in terms of what we are doing to support smallholder farmers, the bank has launched its SME division, which we use to support smallholder farmers. Our intervention currently, we work through commercial banks. So we will be able to support you through the local banks. We work with local banks in Mali. We'll work with all local banks in most of the countries. So they are able to access this funding from us for on lending to the smaller groups, the SMEs, the cooperatives, which we can't do given that we are a wholesale bank, but we do roll out our initiatives through the local banks. And we are happy to work with any local banks that want to work with us in terms of developing the local producers, the small producers. Also, you'll find in the industrial parks that we are setting up, we are actually setting up stores for SMEs. We are setting up stores for cooperatives because we value what you do. And we also want you to benefit from some of the services that are offered in the industrial parks. Thank you.
Okay, there's the gentleman just over there, and then it's you. And then you. And then you. So here. Mhm.
Hello, thank you. Sorry, my name is Uchen Naon from Nigeria. I would want to know if there is anything Afrexim Bank will do in support of young innovators. Like, for instance, I developed a pest control system that is able to get rid of rodents and bed pests in the farm. I'm actually an electrical engineer, and I research grant ends up with a publication, and there is no practical application of this system. Continues to be in the paper, but after the testing, no commercialization. So is there anything that can be done to support such innovation? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll take that question. The next person was here, but so just in terms of your question, we do have schemes that speak specifically to the issue that you raised. So, for instance, we have an initiative we call CNN Evolve, which was about youths, SMEs, and an incubator program. So the bank currently has an incubator program, and we have a cohort of young startups, technological firms that we are helping to pilot and scale up. So we can, and if you see me after this, I can give you some contacts so that we can speak after this in terms of how to integrate or how to access the next cohort with your ideas. So that is something that the bank is well aware of in trying to support young entrepreneurs, especially in the field of agri-tech. And we've been having discussions as well with FARA as to how we can actually also broaden that program with some of the initiatives that we currently have. So that is something that we can, so it's not just about publications, it's about how we can actually action that. So there you go. Your question, sir.
Thank you very much, facilitator. In fact, I'm just thinking to myself, we have brought about 30 of our small-scale farmers. Some of them are commercial. The women that we are seeing here, to ask the question on their behalf, how do we access you? How do we get to you? That's the first question, in which one of them will be asking, they've been signing off a MOU. I know that Dr. Yeni did that. But in clear terms, what is that MOU? What does it to do with us as small-scale farmers? In clear terms. Further to that, there is also a issue you have stated on the ICT, Would like to know what are the good stories with regards to that. I know that the gentleman is no longer there, but what are the good stories? We've got the issue of load shedding. We are just looking at this ICT and we are applying it to our situation in South Africa. It's a really challenge for our farmers. How are we going to piggyback without electricity? How can that ICT work for us? You are also emphasizing that you are helping countries there and there. What about women? We don't hear anything about women, and now and youth. And youth, now at least you have shown that you will network. I think all of us want to network with you. So your business card should be thrown to all of us because we'd like to know how can we penetrate, because Botswana is just right, our neighbor, but we are talking up there while we are the host here. How can we benefit? That's the question.
Okay. So Russell is furiously, showing the flyer that we have there, which has some of the interventions that we deploy. And I don't know whether Anton is still on the line, because that question was to Anton. The second question was to Anton in terms of how to leverage ICT. Yes, but in terms of gender, women, youths, SMEs, smallholders, microfinance, again, this is something that we're starting to work on very, very actively, and we're working on this with partners. In fact, this morning we had conversations with Farah, and in fact, I could even cede my place to Karen to discuss a little bit more of that. But I won't put her on the spot. But the issue is that we are working currently on a problem, because we recognize, and our partners recognize, that it is a problem that we need to be able to engage women, smallholder farmers, capacitate them. And I was talking about that, capacitate them, make sure that they're able to access funding, and that when they access that funding, they're able to deploy it productively, and that they are viable. But for that to happen, needs to be some hand holding. And that's why we're working with organizations like Farah to be able to do that. And I'm very, very keen for us to engage at this stage as we're developing some programs, some more programs, if I can put it that way, especially with the World Food Program. And within the context of the AFCFTA, it is something which is extremely, extremely important for us. So it's not just about the wholesale banking side of things, about the country programs. And even when we talk about country programs, it is a very detailed sort of work plan that we tend to have. So we can go into a sector. So for example, we can go into Burundi and look at the coffee sector and say, what are the issues within Burundi's coffee sector? And it could be that, smallholder farmers don't have the funding, they haven't got the right sort of inputs, they haven't got the right sort of agri-tech that Uchenna, I think, is talking about. And we bring in, a whole suite of solutions to be able to boost that sector. Boost again, yeah. But we have to keep boosting until it kickstarts properly. So those are some of the things that we'll be looking at. So I don't know whether Anton is here, but Karen, you wanted to mention something as well.
Something you said, one of the things that we've seen over the years is, and I'm sure you probably will attest to this, people ask, where are the youth? What about funding for the youth? And practically, if you give a young man who's 28 years, for example, money right now, there's a high likelihood he'll go and marry or, build a house, I mean, and they want to do business. We understand. They'll ask for the money to do business, but how do you make sure that money is put into good use? I know you've had capacity building a lot, and some people will say we are tired of capacity building. We now want to do business. But I think it's also important for you to understand that this money, there's nobody who'll just give you free money. This money has to be put into good use so that we can see the return, the results. And we do want to help, we do want to support, but we also have to make sure that we put the right mechanisms in place so that this money is put into good use. And I'm saying this marriage because of what has happened in Kenya. The government even set up a youth enterprise development fund. 50% of the money 80% of the money doesn't come back because it's supposed to be a loan. And when they go back to check what happened, the stories, my mother, fell sick, I had to put in some money to help her. And you can't really fault them for that, but these are realities that are happening. So will they report to the government, or will they support their mother and take them to hospital? You understand? So these are some of the things that we also have to make sure that the money is put into good use. And that's why the partnership, so we can say, okay, we need a business development service provider who can help them develop a business plan so they can know how to utilize a loan and separate it from personal expenses and be able to report and be able to see the profits and how to divide the profits by paying their salaries. The rest, they take it back to the bank. You know, it's very to the ground, detailed, and that's the kind of support we are talking about. So it's not just about reports and conversations on top of your heads, you know. Yeah. So I just wanted to add on.
No,
to
that's very, very pertinent. Karen, we've got two more questions. I know we have the lady, yes, and then the gentleman at the back. And if we have time, we'll take a half question, and then we need to close.
Okay, thank you. My name is Nyasha from Zimbabwe. Okay, so you've been mentioning that you work with government. So we know there's an African crisis or a challenge whereby things can just end at the top there. How are you ensuring that the people who are supposed to be benefiting actually benefit from it? Because you might give a fund to the government, yes, they'll do 1 or 2 farms, then it ends there. The rest, we don't know where it goes.
Yeah.
So on the issue of accountability, then as a young person, I would like to respond to her. Yes, people will go and marry and what. There's that challenge. We usually prioritize personal stuff, but we also want to grow. But I've had an opportunity to work with a youth empowerment organization. And we implemented this concept where we say, instead of giving young people money, let's say you are a startup or you have your idea, we do not give you directly the money, but if you want a machine, we get the machine for you. If you want inputs, we get the inputs for you, while someone is actually helping you to monitor progress and accountability, and you record you actually start getting money after your business is already set up. So if you need help, I'm willing to volunteer. Thank you.
Thank you. The gentleman at the back.
Thanks. Thanks a lot. It's been great to be in this session. My name is Bongsen Ndimanda. I'm in the Ministry of Agriculture, Rural Development and Land Reform in South Africa. And very, very interesting what she was articulating, the investment that Fluxing Bank is making in Zimbabwe and in Zambia around the agri-parks or agro-parks, whatever you call it. The question that I have in consideration of the economics of the small, because you see, when you were articulating in my mind, that I feel like you've done a lot of research in terms of understanding the economics of the small, the SMMEs within the agriculture sector in the main. What is the business model that is being implemented, if you can articulate it? Because in South Africa, we've had quite a number of investment we've made around the agri-parks. We haven't seen the returns on that investment, you know. So have you realized any returns on this investment? And what are the business model that is being implemented? Is it aggregation? What about the ownership of the assets that are being, you know, put up with whatever investment that you are making in those agri-parks? If you can articulate that, whether also has these case studies been documented? They can be accessed by member countries so that we can have got that exchange of experience and you know, learning, you know, from the investment that we're making. And I can't overemphasize the point that's been made by my colleague who's sitting in the front. I think we should be in contact, given the stories that we've articulated here. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone wants to take that. Jenny? Yeah.
Let me take, an agro park development. Yeah, I mean the agro parks. I mean we don't provide technology or machinery or anything to any private sector. What happens is the government at the moment, but in the future probably the private sector will develop an horizontal infrastructure where you have all the roads, the facilities, the storage facilities, the power, any utility required for putting up an industry will be ready. And the private sector comes and leases the developed land and put up a factory. And then the government will support the smallholder farmers, kind of invested in smallholder farmers to provide raw materials to the industries. So even the relationship between the government that provides support to smallholder farmers is a business to business relationship. So smallholder farmers are not seen also as a kind of recipients of aid, but it's an investment from the government side, so that ultimately the farmers will produce more and pay taxes, and then the government recovers its provided support. So there is no, let's say, direct support to any enterprise during the development of agro-food parks. If I don't know if I have got your point.
Yeah, but let's have a conversation after this session. Yeah, because I can speak to some of the issues that you raised. Okay, I think we have you want. Okay, so Esther.
Maybe just to add, I know one of the challenges that a lot of agro producers have currently is offtake, guaranteed offtake. That's where I think the ball is dropping, because we are producing, and sometimes you've produced, there's no one to uptake the commodities you've produced. Working with World Food Program, we've signed an MOU where World Food Program will be off-taking all produce from our parks. And this really comes from the realization that today World Food Program is importing more than 80% of its grains and commodities from outside Africa to feed Africa. So really, in a partnership with World Food Program, we are working together to try and see how we can ease that cost and reduce it, so that we in Africa are able to produce. They will guarantee offtake. We are also working with other partners, who include COFCO, who are also interested in off-taking commodities. So these are some of the things that Afreximbank has done to try and ensure that whatever is produced will not be wasted. Whatever is produced will go where it needs to go and meet the demand it needs to meet. We also have set up what we call the Africa Trade Exchange, which is a platform now where farmers, buyers, suppliers can actually register. It's for free. You register for free. You are able on this platform to buy and sell your commodities. So this is also one of the channels that the bank has come up with to ensure that if you need maize, if you need fertilizer, if you need chemicals, you are able to go on a portal that gives you access to all the countries within Africa, where you are able to see who is the cheapest supplier. Where can I get this? And if someone is looking, you've got grain, someone in Mali, for example, wants grain, and you're in South Africa, you are able to go and put your product on the platform. They will see that there's someone in South Africa with grain, and you're able to then sell between the two countries. So these are some of the things that the bank is working on to try and ensure that indeed the markets speak to each other and we are able to get our goods moving, our goods bought. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Esther. We are at the end of the yes?
May I make a final comment, please?
That's Anton. Oh, yes.
I've been around.
Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. And I have to say it was very interesting listening to some of the comments and the questions which were made, because ultimately these are the real down-to-earth issues, challenges that we and countries face everywhere. The thing is this, that if we start listening to the individual problems of the individual SMEs, producers, and so on, then it can tend to become a bit overwhelming, to say the least. Because how many producers are there in Africa? How many SMEs are there in Africa? And is it realistic to expect that one institution or even a number of institutions can tackle each of these individually? And I think that that trying to do that might not perhaps be the best way to go about things. So what Mr. Tezera said a bit earlier that, working on a kind of a one-to-many model is really the best way forward. And ultimately, this is what a good strategy would aim to achieve, because it would be addressing not only the individual concerns or challenges of individual institutions, but finding ways of addressing, these challenges through the aggregate institutional framework, which is in any country. And it is these institutions who can then sit with the individual enterprises and actually help them to overcome the challenges that they are experiencing. This is why earlier I also referred to the scope of the strategy, because once again, addressing individual constraints, and they are very real constraints, like how do I make use of these technologies when I don't even have electricity sometimes, okay, which was one of the comments raised. How do we ensure that women and young people, young entrepreneurs are actively involved in trade? These are pertinent questions, but which cannot be answered simply and on an individual basis. So a strategy would help to frame the issues, okay, within a regional or a national context, okay, and then ensure that it provides solutions, okay, so that these challenges, these constraints can be overcome through an aggregate framework ultimately. And I have to say that I also agree with the context that a strategy to be well designed has to be a combined top-down and bottom-up approach. So we have to listen to what the smallhold producer has to say if we are to be able to come up with the right solutions ultimately that would suit the vast majority of the stakeholders there. And this is why indeed a good strategy approach should be owned by the stakeholders. It should be inclusive and participative. It should be needs driven and market oriented, as opposed to only demand driven, which could be wishes. Maybe I am indeed looking for a down payment on my new car. This is why I want to take the loan. Okay, it has to be capacity building oriented, so that the institutions would ultimately be able to continue to carry on with the work without the need for external intervention or external assistance with organizations such as ITC or UNIDO. But ultimately, it also has to be specific and measurable, so that we know exactly what it is that we want to do and what it is that we want to achieve. And if we are not achieving that, to be able to take corrective action where it is necessary. And once again, lots of other things that one can delve into from the comments that have been raised, but I understand we're quite out of time. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be here and to listen and talk to you a little bit, and best wishes for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Anton. We'll definitely be in touch. Thank you very much. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think we give a round of applause for our panelists. And to close, we welcome Dr. Hippolyte Fofak, who is Chief Economist at Afrexim Bank, to close the session and send us on our way.
Thank you very much. I think it's been quite an exciting session. And I've actually been looking at the audience. very pleased to see that this may be one sector which is actually more gender balanced than what one can think of. This is very interesting. And I would also like to really, by way of summary, to stress once again the point that Yemi said earlier. This is a key sector for the continent. It is a growth industry. Anyone who is in this sector is in the right sector. Our population will double, and those who are in this sector will have enough demand for it. And the key question we have is, how do we raise agricultural productivity? How do we increase yield? I think science will do that. Science will do that. So we have to really work across the board. Government have to do their role in terms of building academic institutions, like the Land Grant Act we had in the US, to have those engineering institutions. And then once we increase yield, how do we make sure there's no post-harvest losses? The agribusiness. Our Flexim Bank is doing that. We'll be doing more of that to actually incentivize you to do even more. And I think the bank is in this business, of course, to help you grow, because we need powerful entrepreneurs within the continent. The bank is in this business because we realize that we are spending $50 billion every year to import food. How can that be? And then we run around to look for loan to close balance of payments. I think you're going to help us reduce that big and growing hole in our balance of payments. I think any good central banker should be on your side. Afrexima is on your side. We are going to be your advocate, your ambassador, to push these central bank governors to realize that you're actually helping them to do their work. The bank is in this business because one of our key objectives is to increase intra-African trade. I almost say boosting intra-African trade, but let me increase intra-African trade. And we can only do that. Imagine if the $50 billion which are imported were actually recycled across the continent. That will actually increase intra-African trade by more than 25%. Think about that. At 15% currently. I think we are counting on you to actually achieve our mandate of raising intra-African trade, which is still at 15% of the African trade. So we are actually in this together. And I will not be too long. All I can say is that we are across the entire value chains. We are going to support you in your growth through the product that Esther actually outlined. But we are also in the new line of business, those who really are well advanced and looking for resources to grow even more, the startup, moving to new different area. We have FEDA, the Fund for Export Development in Africa, in the manufacturing space, in the agribusiness space. That's another area where we can actually tap resources to actually help you. And we believe that we can be a good family person, also be a great farmer. I think getting married is not a bad thing. Am I right? So actually you can be a great farmer, a successful farmer, but also a lover, isn't it? So I think we are going to make sure that we all move along the same line. And thank you very much for these wonderful sessions. We need more women in this field to help us. And I think, thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
There's so many things to do.